Hello and welcome to Command Point. I'm Shane, and I am here today to talk to you guys a little bit about tournament win rates and this April stuff that people are talking about. So there's been a lot of people talking about the craziness that is the Harlequin win rate, and I mean just a lot of the stuff on here that I think is worth giving my opinion on. And yeah, I mean, I hope I can parse through this well enough and give you guys some actual useful takes, maybe, possibly. And hopefully it doesn't take too long. So, for starters, I got this chart here from Harlequins. He did a very long video kind of going through the data, more data than just this picture. But I think this is kind of plenty for me to explain my point, because I think this is the thing that I've seen posted around the most and shared, and very strong opinions are being formed off of this. And I don't want to make it sound like I am inherently against tournament data getting posted, because I actually think it's a really great thing that we have all this tournament data. And I think the most important thing, though, is that we can take it and talk about it and maybe provide some context to it, because without context, it's just numbers, and numbers are not inherently useful. Most content creators that I've seen talk about this, though, have had pretty measured opinions on it for the most part, kind of just talking about the data, presenting it, and kind of just saying, I don't want to make any statements on balance or anything like that, but I am here to make statements on balance. Not necessarily sorting my opinions from this chart here. So Harlequins, right at the top, have a 70% win rate. They've actually got 38 players here. This is actually a really good sample size. This is not something like right below it we have Greenskins. It just says Orcs, but that's Greenskins, and they have a 57% win rate, but only 2 players, so we could ignore that. And I mean that's a good sign to kind of ignore data if there's a really small sample size. But the Harlequin sample size is really good. And then you've got also Novitiates, Warp Coven not so much, Pathfinders, Wormblade, Legionaries, Vet Guard, Commandos, Talons even kind of. With great sample sizes here. They have some pretty good numbers as far as people showing up to tournaments and playing them in the month of April. You're going to notice that Corsairs don't have a lot of players, despite the fact that Nachman came out in April, despite the fact, Legionnaires have a lot of players, and they came out in April. Harlequins have a lot of players, they came out in April. Harlequins and Legionnaires are a lot easier to get on the table than Corsairs, frankly. So that's why you're not going to see a lot of them. And I think this is going to play into what I'm going to talk about later with, having experience with factions and being able to pick them up and play them. So first and foremost, I do not want to ramble too much. I think I've been going for like almost 4 minutes now, and I haven't really gotten to any of my points yet. Harlequins have a 70% win rate. This is extremely high. This is a very significant number. A lot of people have looked at this and said, "Holy crap! Nerf them into the ground forever." And maybe Harlequins are too strong. Void Dancers, I should say. Maybe they're just too good. And a 70% win rate certainly points towards that. But let's try and explain it a little bit, because 70% win rate might say that a faction is too good, but when it's this higher than anything near it, Novitiates, for instance, who I mean, on our tier list, we think Novitiates are stronger than Void Dancers, and I actually stand by that still. So why on earth, despite all the crazy sample size, do Harlequins have so much higher of a win rate than Novitiates? Well, for starters, in my opinion, they are a lot easier to play. They ignore a lot of core rules, which means that there's a lower cognitive load when you're playing them. despite the fact that they were a new team, they came to the game very similar to their compendium version. And there's a couple other teams that are kind of like this, but I think Harlequins really kind of take it to another level. They are very similar to Troop, but I think with a higher skill floor, probably. I think most people would agree with that. They have more tricks. A good player can do more with them. But much like Troop, they have a very low skill floor, meaning that it is extremely easy to play them, which is one of my main points here that I'm going to talk about in this video. The tournament win rates in a vacuum do not necessarily tell you what teams are really strong and what teams are really weak. They might, however, tell you what teams are easy to play or easy to win with and what teams are harder to win with, which those are not the same things. I know you might say, oh, really easy to win with, that sounds OP. It sounds like the same as overpowered, but it's not, quite frankly. So, and this ties into skill floors and skill ceilings. Harlequins, Void Dancers, have a very low skill floor. They have a high skill ceiling too, higher than Troop had. They have a lot more tricks. They have a lot more extra roles for a good player to utilize comparatively to Troop. But when you look down and you see Veteran Guard with a 47% win rate, Commandos with a 42% win rate, that's bad for sure. If you ask any good player, though, any top-level player, they're not going to say that Commandos are a bad team or that Veteran Guard are slightly below average like these numbers are going to make you think. What it is going to tell you, what they are probably going to tell you, is that maybe Commandos and Veteran Guard are not as easy to play again, or to play as. You can't just pick them up and win maybe as easily against your average player, which that's what you're running into at a tournament most of the time is your average player, and win. So where do I go next with this? So let's try and explain why Commandos have a 42% win rate, because it's kind of the other end of the spectrum. I could talk about Hunter Clade, who have a 25% win rate, who I also think is a good team, but there's only 7 players, so it's not actually super useful data, even with everything considered. But Commandos, 42% win rate. So a lot of people seem to think they're good. A lot of people consider them to be an A or even S tier team. Why is their win rate so low? I mean, it's ridiculously low, right? So, for starters, they're the most played faction and kill team. There's absolutely no doubting that. Even here in April, the game has been out for like 9 months now, roughly, something like that. And they are still the most played team. That's really impressive. That's kind of crazy, actually. But what does this actually mean? It means if you're going to a tournament, the vast majority of players have run into Commandos. They've had reps against Commandos. They know what Commandos do. If you're showing up with Commandos, there's a really good chance that all your opponents know your rules to some degree. And while I did mention that Void Dancers are similar to Troop, they have a lot of extra rules that are actually very beneficial to the team, where you can get caught off guard playing against them for the first time. And this is in April. This isn't right now. This is because currently recording this, it's almost the end of May. At this point, these win rates have definitely evened out a little bit more. It's still high, but it's nowhere near 70%. So when you're playing against Harlequins for the first time, when you're playing against Void Dancers for the first time, not only are they really easy to play for the pilot, but you have to grapple with the fact that most of the time you probably don't know their rules as well as the person playing them. So you might be wondering, okay, well, let's take a look at Legionnaires and Corsairs. Why they also came out in April? Why don't they have a higher win rate because of this? Well, it kind of comes back to the fact that these teams are just not as easy to play. Legionaries are an elite team and an kill team. I think we know by now that elite teams, unless in the hands of a really capable player, are not easy to go to a tournament and do extremely well with. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not even saying that they're bad inherently, but it is harder for sure. It's definitely harder to win. I guess the ceiling, the floor rather, is a lot higher. And same for Corsairs. Corsairs are not an elite team, but I think they're harder to play for sure, without a doubt, than Harlequins. Are they a worse team than Harlequins? Probably, but not because they're harder to play. It's just it's the actual factors of the team that. I mean, you can make a whole video talking about the reasons that Corsairs are perhaps worse than Void Dancers, but it's not inherently because Void Dancers are easier to play. I just want to get that out there. Vet Guard, just looking at the stats here, might look like a below average team. We think, Ryan and I, and you can take a look at our tier list, we think that Veteran Guard are currently the strongest team in the game. They are not a 47% win rate team in spirit, if that makes sense. They're just harder to win with. They're harder to play. You can't pick them up and dominate the same way that you might be able to with Harlequins, against at an average playing field. But from my perspective, and I'm not the best player ever, but I think I have enough tournament experience, decent high-level experience against really good players to tell you that I would much rather play against the best Void Dancer player than the best Veteran Guard player if I'm top table in the final round of a tournament. And I don't know, I think there's a good chunk of competitive players that would agree with me. So, and I want to tie this into my overarching point here about taking tournament win rates and, finding meaning in them, and why I think determining what teams should get nerfed or which teams should get buffed just based on these numbers like this is not really helpful. And I'm going to draw the comparison to, like a lot of video games, like take a look at MTG, like Magic the Gathering Arena, or like a MOBA like League of Legends. Generally speaking, you go on online, you play in multiplayer, and you're going to, in the competitive format, in the ranked format that a lot of these games are going to provide, you're going to be playing, generally speaking, against players of your skill level. And I guess the ranked format is kind of the closest thing analogous to a tournament in a tabletop game like Kill Team. However, that being said, in something like League of Legends, they have different tiers where the skill level is indicated in terms of who you're playing against and how good you are as a player. They have something called Challenger, which like at the very top is like the top 0.01% of players in that game. And if you're a new player going into, or just an average player even, maybe even an above average player, going into a game like this in a ranked setting, you're not going to run into the Michael Jordan of this game. However, it's not the same in Kill Team. You could be going to a tournament playing your first ever game of Kill Team, and this happens all the time. A lot of people are going to come and, they've looked at the rules and they've built a team and they just haven't had they don't have a play group maybe. And they're going to a tournament that they signed up for and they're just kind of having fun, right? And they're just kind of learning as they go. This is a very common thing. I've played against people at tournaments who are like, yeah, I've never played before today. And a lot of people who have been to tournaments, who have a lot of tournament experience, can testify that this happens frequently. And you could be that guy showing up to a tournament and Ace is there, like the current reigning world champion of ITC, winner of LVO, winner of like the last two big giant Spanish majors, basically the best player in the world right now. And there's nothing stopping you as the brand new player from showing up to a tournament and Ace is there. And maybe you get seeded against him in the first game, but it's not just about playing against the best player ever by happenstance. Maybe you're playing against just a player that's well above your level because, there's nothing stopping you from just showing up at a tournament, with a really good player there. And I'm not ripping the tournament format at all. I actually love the tournament format. And Swiss is going to cut that apart and you'll be playing against people at least at the same win rate. But I mean, we can already determine that doesn't really mean that much. I think tournaments are exciting. I think tournaments are awesome. I would not give up a tournament format for something like that. Not that it's even possible or feasible, but the point is, in those kind of games, like that challenger tier that I'm talking about, if they want to get useful data, the developers of the game, and figure out what's overpowered or what's maybe too weak, typically speaking, they're going to look at the data in that tier. Here, we don't have that. It's anybody playing against anybody. So I think the data is inherently flawed, just based on that. So that being said, a 70% win rate is really high. And like I said before, I think it has more to do with the team being really easy to play for most levels of play, not necessarily the highest level of play, than them being over the top, insanely broken. So what actually is useful, in my opinion, I think like podiums are useful. So like top 3 at a tournament. And Glass Half Dead did a video recently that was actually great, talking about what teams have recently made top 4 or top 3 at a tournament. I think that data is actually really useful. And if you take a look at that, coincidentally, Void Dancers are not, dominating everything. It's a lot more evened out. They're up there for sure. Are they overpowered? I mean, maybe they are. Maybe, but they're certainly not a 70% win rate team, the same way that Commandos are not a 42% win rate team, and Veteran Guard isn't a 47% win rate team. So I guess my little point here is do not get too attached to just win rates in a vacuum, because this information is it's pretty good at telling you what's easy to play and what's hard to play, but it's not actually truly, in my opinion, inherently indicative of what needs to get buffed and what needs to get nerfed. I don't think that even Hunter Clade needs a buff, but I mean, look at them down there. 25% win rate. I mean, 6 wins, 17 losses. I mean, Commandos, 64 wins, 81 losses. That's pretty bad. But there's a lot more context that you need to be able to separate. And I think it's great that we have this data. I'm glad that we do. I'm looking forward to getting more of it at the end of May and seeing what people think of it. But you have to separate it. And I think there's a level of responsibility that comes with making content about this. So that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Are Harlequins broken? Do they deserve to get nerfed? I just think they probably deserve to get changed. I think that their skill floor should probably be higher, but I don't think you should touch their skill ceiling, because I think that, on the top table setting, I think that they are not overwhelming, but maybe for the vast majority of players they are, and that speaks to something, because most players are not ace. Most players are not top 5 in the ITC, and I think their enjoyment of the game is just as important as a competitive player. So I think something should change. Maybe Segarak's just should be tweaked a little bit, because it is a little bit obnoxious, being completely honest. That's coming from me, and I really don't think they're a problem overall. But yeah, let me know what you think. Tell me all your thoughts, because I'm interested to hear it. So shout out, as always, to our patrons over at patreon.com/commandpoint. Their names are going to be scrolling down at any moment now. Maybe they already are. You guys are awesome. You guys are the best. We love you. Shout out to our subscribers. If you're watching this and enjoying our content and you're not subscribed, please consider it. We would very much appreciate you if you subbed. And this is Shane from Command Point talking about tournament win rates. Signing out.